This is a Fox News alert. I'm Brett Baer in Washington. After a debate in Cleveland watched by 24 million people here on Fox, Republican presidential candidates are in Atlanta tonight for a gathering of conservatives. We will have that story in a minute, but first, the breaking news, new details on a story we broke last night involving one of America's most dangerous enemies, and even more questions about President Obama's Iran nuclear deal. National security correspondent Jennifer Griffin is at the Pentagon with our top story. Griffin live from the Pentagon. We'll try to get that piece queued up. Jen, breaking news on the story that you broke yesterday on Soleimani.
Well, what's interesting, Brett, is that yesterday it was very difficult to get any U.S. officials to comment or confirm the story. Today, Iranian officials came out and, in fact, confirmed not only that Qasem Soleimani, the general, the shadowy Iranian general who's been under sanctions by the U.S. since 2005, that he had traveled to Russia, but they also confirmed that he was there to do weapons deals, arms deals with the Russians, including talk of the S-300 missile system. Brett?
Let's take a listen.
A day after U.S. officials refused to comment, Iranian officials confirmed today General Qasem Soleimani, the heavily sanctioned Revolutionary Guard Quds Force commander, did travel to Russia last month, adding he was conducting weapons deals, including discussion of the S-300 missile system. Today, U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Samantha Power, acknowledged the U.S. is very concerned about this development.
This travel ban requires all states to prohibit Qasem Soleimani from traveling to their nation. And the only exception to that is if the Iran Sanctions Committee grants an exemption.
The White House was reluctant to comment, publicly avoiding blaming the Russians for hosting the Iranian general.
I can't confirm these specific reports, but it is an indication of our ongoing concerns with Iran and their behavior.
According to two separate Western intelligence sources, Soleimani arrived in Moscow from Tehran on Friday, July 24th on Iran Air Flight 5130 and departed just 3 days before Secretary of State John Kerry testified about the Iran nuclear deal before the Senate Armed Services Committee, assuring Congress pressure would remain on Iran's shadowy general.
That under the United States' initiative, Qasem Soleimani will never be relieved of any sanctions.
In Moscow, General Soleimani met with President Vladimir Putin and Russia's defense minister. The news comes as a UN arms embargo against Iran is slated to be lifted in 5 years, a controversial last-minute add-on to the nuclear agreement. Soleimani was photographed in Iraq recently on the front lines as his Shia militias battled ISIS, also in defiance of the travel ban. He is blamed for the deaths of 500 Americans in Iraq. He orchestrated the thwarted assassination attempt on the Saudi ambassador's life at a restaurant here in Washington. Soleimani's Moscow visit elicited this response during the Republican debate last night.
And part of this Iranian deal was lifting the international sanctions on General Soleimani. The day General Soleimani flew back from Moscow to Iran was the day we believe that Russia used cyber warfare against the Joint Chiefs.
The former head of the powerful House Intelligence Committee, Congressman Mike Rogers, issued a statement highlighting his concern. Quote, a leading general in Iran just told the world that the United States of America is irrelevant, and Russia welcomed him with open arms. Brett?
Jennifer Griffin, live at the Pentagon. Jennifer, thank you. President Obama is dealing tonight with the first major Democratic defection in the Senate over his nuclear deal with Iran. Correspondent Rich Edson has that story from the White House.
Serious weaknesses, troubling, and better off without it. Just several of the more than 1,600 words New York Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer uses to describe the Iran nuclear agreement in announcing his opposition to it. Schumer will likely be the Senate's next top Democrat. He says he opposes the deal in part because he claims it would allow Iran, after 10 to 15 years, to be a nuclear threshold state with the blessing of the world community. The chief U.S. negotiator disputes that claim.
I profoundly disagree with the judgment made. I would respectfully suggest that rejection is not a policy for the future. It does not offer any alternative.
Congressman Elliot Engel and Brad Sherman, the top two Democrats on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, are joining Schumer in his opposition. As these top Democrats announced their opposition, President Obama again compared American critics of this deal to opponents of it in Iran.
The reason that Mitch McConnell and the rest of the folks in his caucus who opposed this jumped out and opposed it before they even read it, before it was even posted, is reflective of an ideological commitment not to get a deal done. And in that sense, they do have a lot in common with hardliners who are much more satisfied with the status quo.
And the White House says officials deny Schumer's defection will persuade other Democrats to oppose the deal.
So I think there's a preponderance of evidence to indicate that Democrats are going to make up their minds not based on Senator Schumer's conclusion, but based on their own conclusions about the merits of this agreement and the strategy to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon.
The White House says the president is confident in his administration's ability to build support among Democrats for this deal. Congress weighs in next month. Brett?
Rich Edson, live on the North Lawn. Rich, thanks. While much of the political universe, including many of you, spent the day reacting to the first of the season GOP debates in Cleveland, several of the participants were already doing follow-up work in front of a sold-out gathering of conservatives in Georgia. Correspondent Jonathan Sari has our coverage tonight from Atlanta.
After what some are calling a winning night at last night's debate in Ohio, Florida Senator Marco Rubio spoke out in Atlanta today at the annual Red State Gathering.
We will be able to leave for our children not just a great country, but the greatest nation, greater than it's ever been. And we will be able to say that we were the authors of a 21st century that history will record was also an American century.
Rubio was among 5 Republican presidential contenders to speak at today's sessions.
Both this administration and the Republicans in Washington, D.C., I will suggest, have failed us when it comes to funding our military.
Let us not be apologetic for our position on life as conservatives.
Immigration without assimilation is invasion. We must not let that happen in America.
From defense to abortion to immigration, the candidates are using these early events to tout their conservative views before an influential crowd, according to Emory political science professor Merle Black.
The overwhelming majority of people who show up, say, at the Red State will be very, very strong conservatives, many of them party activists, and they're looking for a candidate. They're looking for someone who expresses their views, but at some point they're also looking for someone who has a chance of actually being nominated or actually winning a presidential election. But usually those calculations come in much later in the process.
Late this afternoon, former Hewlett-Packard CEO Carly Fiorina rallied the crowd. Most analysts agreed that she won the early debate yesterday.
We have Inspector General reports that tell us every several months that they find federal government employees who are watching porn all day long and pulling down the same pay, pension, and benefits as somebody trying to do a good job. Really? As Donald Trump would say, you're fired.
And Donald Trump is among 5 additional candidates scheduled to speak at the Red State Gathering tomorrow. The normally outspoken candidate expected to address fans at a Red State tailgate party at the College Football Hall of Fame. Brett?
Jonathan Sari, live in Atlanta. Jonathan, thank you. Up next, breaking down last night's Republican presidential candidate debate. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 20 in Montgomery, Alabama, as 6 people were injured when a tornado partially collapsed the roof of a Walmart in Troy. None of the injuries serious. The storm also flipped an 18-wheeler and tore out a wall of a nearby sporting goods store. Fox 35 in Richmond, Virginia, as the state begins recalling and replacing license plates bearing the image of the Confederate flag. Last week, a judge issued a ruling dissolving a 2001 injunction that allowed the symbol to appear on specialty plates. And this is a live look from Denver and our affiliate Fox 31. A team from the EPA accidentally triggered a huge release of orange and yellow mine wastewater into a tributary of the Animas River. and down toward Durango. The river is closed to all watercraft now. Drinking water is not affected so far. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.